Hi all, welcome to another episode of the Leading Safely podcast. Today's episode is a little controversial, and I'm okay with that. I strongly believe that as leaders and as safety professionals, we need to be thinking critically about the way we do our jobs, what we say and what we do, and always striving to be better. So today's post is about celebrating zero events. Zero incidents, zero injuries, and whatever amount of time your brightly lit billboard or scorecard is flouting. In a perfect world, things don't go bump and wheels don't fall off. Humans don't make mistakes and people don't suffer. But we don't live in a perfect world. No amount of denial of human fallibility makes it so. We have hospitals, morgues, and cemeteries that remind us that human life is not only finite, but that suffering and risk test your attitude to learning. In the midst of human reality, there are proponents claiming that all accidents are preventable and advocating zero harm. Some organisations even reward employees for meeting zero goals and thereby prime workers to hide, deny, and underreport harm. Dr. Rob Long says, if we accept that there is no such thing as zero risk, then we should not spin the meaning of words with assertions such as all accidents are preventable. And Deming said, eliminate slogans, exhortations and targets for the workforce asking for zero defects and new levels of productivity. Such exhortations only create adversarial relationships, and the bulk of the causes of low quality and low productivity belong to the system and thus lie beyond the power of the workforce. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying your organisation's goal should not be zero harm. I think every organisation should aim to logically have zero or no harm to their workers. However, whether or not I think this could be a reality is a whole nother episode. Incentivising safety KPIs is also closely linked to this topic as well, and again deserves an episode on its own. What I am saying though is, when people make a link and when organisations start a countdown to X amount of days LTI or X amount of injury-free days or incident-free days, they are starting down a rabbit hole of negativity that focuses on the reactive instead of the proactive. So when did zero harm start to become a thing? When I think back to the commencement of my health and safety career, almost 20 years ago now, behavioural safety was a thing of the day. From what I understand, behavioural safety came about after society recognised that throughout the years, health and safety improvements had to include the element of people if they were to succeed. This meant WHS programs finally started to focus on getting buy-in from workers, creating a commitment rather than a compliance culture, and to me, this was the birth of zero harm. In the early days though, it really was just a visionary statement used by leaders or in work health and safety policies plastered over corporate office walls. However, over time, it has become a linchpin to health and safety to the point now where some companies are using zero harm in all of their health and safety material, simply because they won't win work with the big players if they don't. For me, I think the jump between this philosophy of zero harm came when leaders started thinking for there to be literally zero harm. This means zero incidents and zero injuries. So these were the types of goals that were set. KPIs such as increasing the amount of days the business can run without an incident became more common. Calendars were put up in crib rooms, safety crosses on display in common areas with green stickers denoting incident and injury-free days and red stickers for the days where an incident had occurred. As a safety professional working for an organisation which billboarded its zero harm slogan in wall size across buildings, almost so big you could see it from space, I can tell you the culture and morale amongst the workforce was far from one of zero harm. Bullying was rife. There was no psychologically safe ground on that site. Every single pre-shift meeting I attended was the same, and maybe this sounds familiar to you, for other reasons, but you would turn up and stand around listening to the production focus of the day. Diggers needing to make up time, maintenance needing to understand priorities, even steak night back at camp would get a mention. Health and safety would get a 2-minute slot, if you're lucky, 3 minutes, just long enough to read out some poorly written safety alert to a crew too overworked to care. Then the focus goes back to the tonnes required for the day and the carrot for hitting those tonnes, a barbecue or a Bunnings gift card, or even a cash bonus. The minute an incident occurred on that site, every manager in his Land Cruiser Prado attended the incident scene to determine how this red dot sticker event was going to impact their barbecue or their Bunnings gift card status. Once any form of incident report was compiled, the questions started. Are you sure he isn't putting it on? Are you sure he didn't hurt himself at home? Does this have to be reported? Why is it a notifiable? How can we provide alternative duties so that we don't have to carry this statistic? Workers knew these were the questions that were asked every single time there was an incident. They knew about the green dots and the red dots, and they knew that their leaders cared more about that stat for 0 incidents and injuries than about them as a person contributing to the organisation's goals. I saw injuries occur and workers blatantly lie to my face about how it happened, out of fear and really out of shame. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a leader or manager tell you the organisation had achieved X amount of days incident or injury free? Yet, when you ask them how the organisation actually achieved this or what they learned along the way, they could not answer. That's what I'm referring to. When you become an organisation that counts the green dot versus the red dots, you move into that reactive space that you may never be able to climb out of. I worked for the next organisation for a very short time. I had to remove myself from the organisation as a HSE professional for a number of reasons, including the fact that my values and the organisation's values were no longer in alignment. The site had a number of plant and assets that were extremely old and run down. We're talking high-risk bits of gear that were like 30 to 50 years old. Rusty, leaking, broken, dilapidated, condemned. These are the words used to describe what I saw. On top of this, you had numerous departments within the organisation that had internal disagreements to the point where departmental administrators refused to speak to each other, and even worse, whole departments did not interact with other departments. Their safety assurance program was an inspection regime formatted and called some fancy name to ensure it ticked a strategic box back at the corporate end of the stick. When I walked into a room and introduced myself to leaders, there would be that dead, awkward silence, as if health and safety was the biggest mood killer in the world. Danger tape would be used to signal PPE requirements. Caution tape was used to alert of faults, and exclusion zones was not within the site glossary of terms. But sure enough, prior to finishing up, a manager tells me that I'm invited to their 600-day incident-free celebration. I literally choked on my water. You cannot honestly tell me that despite half a century old plant and equipment, despite the disengaged low morale workforce, despite the toxic work environment, despite the non-sharing of knowledge and subpar safety standards, that there had been 0 incidents in close to 2 years. And when your number is this big, so big that you're having some gala event with fancy dress and canapes and drinks, imagine how Jono feels and what he does when he's just doing his job and accidentally puts a hammer to his thumb, busting it open and needing a hospital visit. Well, I'll tell you. He glues his thumb back together himself with super glue and continues on with the job. When I was a trainer, I had a student who owned a heavy plant and equipment maintenance company. We're talking family owned with about 40 or so employees. She was extremely proud as she announced during the module on incident investigation that the company she owned had never had an incident in 15 years. As you can imagine, I did a double take. Your workers are under excavators, dump trucks, dozers and the like all day long, and you're saying not one person has bumped their head or banged their elbow. To me, it was a blatant lie or blatant ignorance. You choose. So here's the thing. I don't align with the statement that all accidents or incidents or injuries are preventable at all. I believe as long as there is the human factor, there will be incidents and events. I also believe that whilst we cannot prevent all incidents from occurring, we can take time to learn as much as we can from them, assisting us to identify and mitigate risk accordingly. For me, this is where the issue lies when you start flouting that you've had so many days incident or injury free. It's like you're saying your workers are so safe they don't injure themselves, or your work environment is so safe an incident or injury simply cannot occur. But here's the thing, some risks will never be ranked as low. As low as reasonably practicable on the risk matrix may simply be a ranking of moderate. Unless you have eliminated the risk altogether, you still have the potential for your risk to turn into event. So why purport otherwise? I don't care how many incident-free or injury-free days your organisation claims to have. I guarantee that if you dig deep enough amongst your workforce, you'll find those events you're claiming you've avoided. So what do you do instead of celebrating injury or incident-free days? How about celebrating the fact that your workers participated in a consultation session, or that you received positive feedback from your team? Perhaps celebrate that worker morale is at an all-time high, or that workers feel comfortable enough to report issues they might be having at home. Celebrate that today, Johnny identified an issue with the hammer that is being used across site, which could have resulted in a lot more than just busted thumbs. And why not celebrate that workers on return to work plans feel like they're wanted, that they're part of a team, and completely supported in their transition back into the workforce? Obviously, these were just some examples. However, there literally is so many positive health and safety indicators that can be utilised for a visual metric. Finally, I would like to leave you with a thought. Regardless of the industry you work in, psychological safety is the foundation stone of a positive health and safety culture. Workers should feel supported to speak up about everything from psychosocial hazards to reporting events that may impact company celebrations or financial incentives. Once you've burned that feeling of safety and left a worker feeling exposed to the elements, you lose the worker in so many ways and you end up placing the worker's safety further at risk, contradicting your whole zero harm goal in the first instance. Right. Well, that brings us to the close of another episode. Please feel free to send me your thoughts and opinions, or if there's a topic that you would like discussed, reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, or alternatively, email it to me at leadingsafely@outlook.com. Until next time, stay safe.